Welcome back to the Remdesivir Files, a COVID 19 chronicle. You're listening to episode 6 from Lab to Label. In this episode, we are diving into something that often stays behind the scenes the science and sheer logistical challenge of manufacturing a drug like Remdesivir at scale, especially under the pressure of global emergency. Joining us today is Saakshi Sharma.
Thank you for having me. I'm really glad we are shedding light on this topic. Manufacturing is one of those areas that becomes absolutely critical in a crisis, yet rarely gets discussed in technical detail.
Let's start right at the beginning. Once it was clear that Remdesivir might be effective against SARS-CoV-2, how did the pharmaceutical industry pivot from a lab-scale drug to mass production?
That's a great place to begin. Initially, remdesivir had only been manufactured in small clinical trial quantities, think a few kilograms. But when COVID-19 hit, the sudden global interest required a pivot to thousands of kilograms in a matter of months. The key challenge here is remdesivir is a chemically complex molecule. It's a monophosphoramidate prodrug of an adenosine analog, and the synthesis involves multiple steps, many of which require tightly controlled conditions, exotic reagents, and specialized equipment. So, the first step was to establish a consistent, scalable, and synthetic route. Chemists had to optimize yields at every stage, ensure the stereochemistry was preserved, and design a robust purification process. At the same time, formulation scientists were working on the intravenous form because remember, remdesivir isn't orally bioavailable. It needed to be solubilized effectively, stable under refrigeration, and compatible with IV delivery systems. All of this had to happen while planning large scale campaigns that could run under GMP, which is Global Manufacturing Practices, without compromising the quality.
Let's talk more about that formulation. Why is Remdesivir given intravenously? And what kind of formulation issues does that create?
Great question. The reason remdesivir isn't orally administered is due to poor oral bioavailability. It's extensively metabolized in the liver if taken by mouth, and you can't simply get therapeutic concentrations in the bloodstream. So, IV administration became the only viable route for now. But IV formulation comes with its own issues. Remdesivir is not very soluble in water. It requires solubilizing agents like SPECD or sulfobutyl ether beta cyclodextrin. Even then, the formulations has to remain stable across a range of pH values and it must be sterile, free of endotoxins and preservatives free since it's typically administered in hospital settings. There's a lyophilization or freeze drying used in some formats to make storage and transportation easier, especially in countries without consistent cold chain logistics.
Once the formulation is ready, what does it take to scale up manufacturing under good manufacturing practices? And how do you ensure quality when you're rushing production?
That's the crux of pharmaceutical manufacturing, especially during a pandemic. GMP is a legal and ethical framework to ensure that every vial of the drug is safe, effective, and consistent. During emergencies, regulatory authorities may allow for accelerated process, but GMP requirements don't get relaxed. If anything, they become more vital. You have to qualify facilities, validate processes, and institute real-time batch monitoring. That means checking for impurities, verifying dissolution rates, assessing particulate matter, all of this at industrial scale. Scale-up introduces challenges like maintain uniform mixing, controlling heat distribution in large reactors, and ensuring consistent drying and milling. Plus, there's a human factor, training staff, ensuring cleanliness, documenting every step. One deviation in pH or an incorrect solvent ratio can cause entire batch failure. And during COVID, we couldn't afford batch failures.
Let's say everything is going smoothly in the factory, but when a drug is urgently needed around the world, how do you handle packaging, supply chain logistics, and global regulatory expectations.
Even if the drug is ready, packaging and distribution present massive hurdles. Remdesivir needed to be shipped in glass vials, stored at specific temperatures, and labeled in multiple languages. That alone required coordination with suppliers of raw materials, vial manufacturers, and packing vendors across continents, often under lockdown conditions. Add to that the challenge of global regulatory synchronization. Each country has its own labeling standards, import requirements, batch testing expectation. You need quality assurance teams coordinating with regulatory affairs to make sure every batch leaving the plant meets local and international criteria. And it's all happening in real time, often 24 into 7, with evolving guidance. The phrase from lab to label might sound simple, but it encapsulates months of around the clock work, cross disciplinary expertise, and high stakes decision making.
Incredible. Final question. What did the industry learn from scaling up remdesivir under such pressure? Are there lessons that could help us prepare better for the next health emergency?
Absolutely. The Remdesivir experience showed us the value of flexible manufacturing platforms, modular facilities, pre-approved images, and synthetic pathways that can be adapted quickly. We also saw the importance of decentralized supply chains. Relying too heavily on one region for raw materials became a bottleneck. And finally, collaboration between industry, regulators, and academia proved vital. There's now a growing emphasis on plug and play platforms. Think mRNA, viral vectors, or small molecules, where the infrastructure is ready and just the payload changes. That's the kind of system resilience we'll need to go forward. Remdesivir taught us that science can move fast, but manufacturing has to be just as agile.
That's a powerful note to end on. Thank you, Saakshi, for this deep dive into the industrial and scientific complexity behind making a drug during a global emergency.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to the Remdesivir Files, a COVID-19 chronicle. Don't forget to subscribe and join us next time for episode 7, Global Access or Global Divide, when we explore a global distribution of this drug. Until next time, stay safe and stay informed.